My name is Jenna Whitaker, 34 years old, sitting in a Clark County family courtroom on the outskirts of Las Vegas, Nevada. The air felt thick with judgment as my husband's attorney stood up and painted me as the perfect picture of failure: no steady job, no personal assets, no real income, just a woman living off her husband's success. Then Brandon himself rose from his seat at the petitioner's table, adjusted his tie with that calm arrogance I knew too well, and spoke directly to the judge in a voice that carried across the room. "Your Honor, my wife is an irresponsible spouse. She has no career, no money of her own, no property in her name. She's been dependent on me for everything. She does not deserve a single dime from our joint assets." The gallery erupted in soft, mocking laughter. A few people even whispered loud enough for me to hear. She really thought she could walk away with something. I sat completely still at the respondent's table, hands folded in my lap, eyes fixed straight ahead. I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I didn't even flinch. But then I glanced down at my watch, just a quick, subtle look, as if I were counting seconds. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a deliberate thud. A man in a sharp gray suit walked straight down the center aisle, briefcase in hand. He didn't hesitate. He placed the black leather case on the judge's bench and opened it to reveal a set of documents stamped with the seal of the United States government. "Agent Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation," he announced, voice level and unhurried. "Your Honor, we are exercising federal jurisdiction over this matter due to an ongoing investigation involving financial crimes. This proceeding must be paused immediately." The judge's eyes scanned the first page. His expression shifted from mild irritation to visible unease. He asked two quick questions to confirm authority, then looked up at the packed gallery. "This court will recess pending federal review," he said, voice firm. "All parties are to maintain the current status quo. The courtroom is cleared. Now." The gavel struck once, sharp and final. I remained seated for a moment longer. My face showed nothing. But inside the corner of my mouth lifted just a fraction. If you've ever been dismissed, belittled, or told you're worth nothing by the people who are supposed to love you most, stay with me. This story is for you. Where are you watching from right now? Drop a comment below. Tell me your city, your country, or just a quick word about a time someone underestimated you. Hit like if you've ever had to stay silent while people laughed at your expense. Because sometimes silence is the loudest weapon. You won't want to miss what happens next. The courtroom doors closed behind me with a heavy click that echoed down the marble hallway. I walked out alone, past the lingering whispers and sideways glances, and got into my car parked under the relentless Las Vegas sun. The leather seats were already hot from sitting in the open lot all morning. I started the engine, turned on the air conditioning full blast, and pulled out onto the wide boulevard that led back towards Summerlin. As the city skyline shrank in the rearview mirror and the desert landscape opened up flat, dry, unforgiving, I let my mind drift back 4 years to the moment everything changed. I was still working as a junior financial analyst at a regional bank downtown then. My days were filled with spreadsheets, compliance reports, and quiet conversations about risk exposure. Brandon would come home late most nights, briefcase in hand, talking about growth opportunities and new partnerships. At first, I thought it was just the usual CEO stress, but one evening he left his laptop open on the kitchen island while he took a call in the study. I wasn't snooping, at least not intentionally. I was just closing the lid when a notification popped up: an incoming wire transfer alert for $425,000 to an account labeled Nevada Ventures, LLC. The name didn't match any client or vendor I'd ever heard him mention. That was year one, quiet suspicion. I started paying closer attention. When he brought home printed board packets or left emails visible on his phone, I noticed patterns. Large transfers routed through shell entities with no clear business purpose. Payments to consultants who had no online presence. reimbursements labeled government relations that never tied back to any official contract. I told myself it could be legitimate, maybe aggressive tax planning, maybe offshore expansion. But the numbers kept growing, and the explanations got thinner. Year 2, I began tracking. I used the shared family banking app access we'd set up years earlier for household bills to monitor the joint accounts. Every time a withdrawal or transfer appeared, I cross-referenced it against public records and business registries in Nevada. Shell companies were easy to form here. The state's privacy laws made it simple. I created a private spreadsheet on my own encrypted drive. Dates, amounts, routing numbers, beneficiary names. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Year 3. The evidence became undeniable. I found emails forwarded from his work account to his personal one, conversations with a county official about expedited permitting and favorable audit outcomes. There were voice memos on his old phone. He never deleted short clips of him promising additional support in exchange for looking the other way on compliance filings. I downloaded everything I could without triggering alerts. I even recorded one late-night call he took in the garage. Brandon pacing under the fluorescent light, voice low, promising the next installment will be wired by Friday. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Not at first. I was doing it because I understood the scale. Whitaker Financial Solutions employed over 200 people, analysts, developers, customer support staff, who had families depending on their paychecks. If the fraud collapsed publicly without warning, those jobs would vanish overnight. Clients, small businesses, retirees could lose everything they'd entrusted to the platform. I couldn't ignore that. Year 4, I made the decision. The evidence was solid enough for federal scrutiny. I contacted the FBI through their anonymous financial crimes tip line. No name, no direct contact. Just uploaded files and a brief explanation. Internal documents suggest embezzlement and bribery involving Whitaker Financial Solutions. Potential harm to employees and customers. They responded within days. A quiet meeting in a nondescript office park. They explained they'd already had the company on their radar for suspicious activity reports filed by banks. My data filled in the gaps they couldn't reach from the outside. I became a cooperating witness. Nothing glamorous, just someone providing internal context. Back in the house on Summerlin Drive, the atmosphere had always been carefully curated. Vivian Whitaker, Brandon's mother, lived for appearances. She would walk through the living room, inspecting picture frames, and throw pillows, then turn to me with a tight smile and say, "A daughter-in-law should know how to maintain the family image, dear." She never raised her voice, but the disapproval was constant, like humidity you couldn't escape. Brooke, Brandon's older sister, carried a different kind of resentment. She'd never worked a day outside the family business yet. She acted as if her last name alone granted her superiority. She hated that I once had a real job, one that required a degree and actual skills. "Must be nice sitting at home typing," she'd say, whenever I mentioned freelance editing work, her tone dripping with false pity. Ryan, Brooke's husband and the company's CFO, was colder. Practical to the bone. He never wasted words on insults. He simply dismissed me. "Don't ask about company matters if you don't understand them," he'd say, whenever I tried to join a conversation at dinner. He treated me like background noise. I absorbed it all without reaction. Every comment, every look, every subtle exclusion. I stored them the same way I stored transaction records, methodically, silently. I smiled when expected. I nodded. I waited. The sun was dipping lower now, turning the desert sky orange as I pulled into the driveway. The house looked exactly the same as it had that morning, clean lines, manicured lawn, the illusion of perfection. But inside, something had shifted. The silence I'd kept for 4 years was no longer just endurance. It was strategy. Agent Carter led me down a narrow corridor away from the main courtroom, past closed doors and the faint hum of air conditioning. We entered a small conference room with plain walls and a long table. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. I did, folding my hands on the surface, keeping my breathing even. He placed a thin folder in front of me but didn't open it yet. "We've been watching Whitaker Financial Solutions for over a year," he said, voice low and measured. Suspicious activity reports started coming in from multiple banks, unusual wire transfers, shell entities with no clear business activity, payments to public officials that didn't match any disclosed contracts. We built the case from the outside, but we needed someone who could confirm the internal picture. That's where you came in. I nodded once. I had known this moment would arrive eventually. The anonymous tip I sent 4 years ago had been the spark, but the FBI had already been circling. My role was never to start the fire, just to provide the oxygen. He continued. "Your data filled in the gaps. Emails, memos, voice notes, transaction logs that only someone inside the household could access. Without that, we'd still be piecing together fragments. You gave us the complete chain." There was no praise in his tone, and I didn't expect any. This wasn't about recognition. It was about containment, stopping the damage before it spread further. He slid the folder toward me. Inside were copies of the asset freeze order and a temporary injunction on all joint accounts. "We're moving now. The family will be called back in shortly. They won't be laughing this time." I scanned the pages. The language was precise: temporary restraint on disposition of assets pending federal review, prohibition on transferring funds or property, immediate notification to financial institutions. Standard procedure under federal fraud statutes. Nothing dramatic, just the slow tightening of a net that had been in place long before I walked into that courtroom. The door opened again. Brandon entered first, followed by Vivian, Brooke, and Ryan. They looked different now. No smirks, no casual posture. Brandon's tie was loosened slightly, as if he'd tugged at it on the way down the hall. Vivian held her purse in both hands like a shield. Brooke's eyes were wide, lips pressed into a thin line. Ryan stared at the floor, jaw tight. Agent Carter stood at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming back. This is no longer a family court matter. Jurisdiction has shifted to federal authority due to evidence of financial crimes involving Whitaker Financial Solutions. We have executed a temporary asset freeze on all jointly held accounts and company-linked holdings. No funds may be moved, no property transferred until further notice." Brandon's voice came out controlled, but the edge was there. "What exactly is going on here?" Carter met his gaze without flinching. "We have probable cause to believe embezzlement and bribery occurred within the company. Transfers to shell entities, payments to public officials for favorable treatment, falsified records. The evidence is substantial." Vivian's eyes flicked to me for the first time since the courtroom. They were sharp, disbelieving, and furious all at once. She didn't speak, but the look said enough. "How could you?" Brooke remained silent, fingers clenched around the strap of her bag so tightly the leather creased. Ryan still hadn't lifted his head. His breathing was shallow, deliberate, the way someone breathes when they're calculating how much longer they can stay calm. Brandon turned toward me. "You did this?" I held his stare for a long second. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say that the documents in front of us hadn't already explained. Carter spoke again. "We're not here to discuss motives or personal grievances. This is about the law. The freeze is in place. Interviews will begin soon. You're free to leave for now, but no one is to leave the jurisdiction without notifying us. Any attempt to access frozen assets will be considered obstruction." The room stayed quiet for a beat. No one moved. Then Brandon stood, chair scraping against the tile. He looked at me one more time, searching, almost pleading, for a moment before turning away. Vivian rose next, slow and dignified, as if maintaining posture could still salvage something. Brooke followed, eyes glassy now. Ryan was last, shoulders hunched, face pale. They filed out without another word. Carter waited until the door closed. "You okay?" I exhaled slowly. "I'm fine." He nodded. "We'll need you for a formal statement tomorrow. Nothing public yet. We're keeping this contained until we have all the pieces." I stood up. "I understand." He opened the door for me. I stepped back into the hallway. The fluorescent lights felt brighter now, the air cooler. I walked toward the exit, past the security desk, past the few people still lingering in the lobby. Outside, the desert heat hit me again, but it didn't feel as oppressive as it had that morning. I got into my car and sat there for a minute with the engine off, hands on the wheel. The morning's events played back in my mind, not the laughter in the courtroom, not the judge's gavel, but the moment Brandon looked at me in that conference room. There had been something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not even fear. Recognition. He finally understood that I had been watching him the whole time. I started the engine and pulled out of the lot. The road stretched ahead, straight and empty under the wide Nevada sky. For the first time in 4 years, the silence inside me didn't feel like waiting anymore. It felt like release. I stepped out of the conference room into the wide hallway of the Clark County Courthouse. The fluorescent lights overhead cast long shadows on the polished floor. Footsteps echoed behind me almost immediately. Vivian and Brooke appeared first, moving quickly but without the earlier rush of anger. Vivian stopped a few feet away, her posture straight, voice low and controlled. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Her words weren't loud, but they carried the same sharp edge she used when correcting table settings or commenting on my choice of shoes. Brooke stood beside her, arms, crossed, eyes fixed on me with a resentment that had been building for years. "You've always wanted to be better than us, haven't you?" she said quietly, the jealousy plain in her tone. "This is your way of proving it." Ryan came up last. He held a thin stack of papers in one hand, the kind of document that lawyers prepare in a hurry. He extended it toward me without meeting my eyes. "This is a motion for temporary custody of Ethan," he said, voice flat. "We're filing it to protect him from all of this chaos." I didn't reach for the papers. I looked straight at him instead. The hallway felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. "If you check the Shell account ending in 4821, I said, keeping my voice soft, almost conversational. "The transfer on June 14th last year, you'll see your signature authorizing it." Ryan froze. His hand holding the motion trembled slightly. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Vivian's gaze shifted between us. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Brooke's arms dropped to her sides. For once, she had nothing to say. I turned and walked away. My shoes clicked steadily against the tile. Behind me, the three of them stood motionless in the middle of the corridor. I didn't look back. The exit doors were ahead. I pushed through them into the bright Nevada afternoon. The heat rolled over me like a wave, but it felt distant now. My pulse stayed even. My breathing remained calm. I crossed the parking lot to my car. The engine started with a familiar low hum. I pulled out slowly, merging into the flow of traffic on the boulevard. The courthouse shrank in the rearview mirror until it disappeared behind a row of palm trees. The drive home was quiet. No radio, no phone calls. Just the steady rhythm of tires on pavement and the occasional flash of sunlight off passing vehicles. I thought about Ethan, where he was right now, probably in after-school care at the private academy in Henderson, drawing pictures or playing on the playground. He didn't know any of this yet. He shouldn't have to. When I reached the house in Summerlin, the driveway was empty. Brandon's car was still downtown, probably with his attorney. The house looked the same as always. White stucco, clean lines, the kind of place that photographs well from the street. I parked in the garage and sat there for a moment with the engine off. Inside, the air was cool and still. I walked through the kitchen, past the island where I'd first seen that wire transfer notification 4 years ago. The memory didn't sting anymore. It felt like a closed chapter. I went upstairs to the guest room I'd quietly turned into a workspace years earlier. The desk was plain, the chair secondhand. On the shelf above it sat the external drive, small, black, unremarkable. I opened my laptop and plugged it in. The files loaded quickly. Spreadsheets scanned emails, audio clips, time-stamped and labeled. Everything organized by year, by entity, by amount. I scrolled through the most recent entries, the last transfer Ryan had authorized before today's hearing. His digital signature was unmistakable, clear, precise, the same one he used on company checks. I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. The phone rang on the desk. Agent Carter's name appeared on the screen. I answered. "We've served the freeze notice on the banks," he said. "No accounts have been touched yet. We're coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office for formal charges. You'll need to come in tomorrow for the full statement. 10 a.m. at the field office. I'll be there." He paused. "You handled the hallway well. They're rattled." "That's good. Means they're less likely to do something stupid." I didn't respond. There was nothing to add. After the call ended, I sat back in the chair. The room was quiet except for the low fan in the ceiling. Outside, the sun was lowering, turning the sky the color of faded copper. I thought about the years I'd spent in this house, smiling at family dinners, nodding when Vivian critiqued my clothes, listening to Brooke's veiled comments about my lack of ambition. I thought about the nights I stayed up after everyone was asleep, reviewing files, cross-checking dates, building the case piece by piece. None of it had been easy, but it had been necessary. I closed the laptop and stood up. The hallway outside the room was dim. I walked past Ethan's bedroom door, closed the way he liked it when he wasn't home. I didn't open it. There was no need. He was safe for now. Downstairs, I poured a glass of water from the kitchen sink and stood at the window. The neighborhood was peaceful, kids riding bikes, a few houses down, sprinklers running in the front yard across the street. Ordinary life continuing as if nothing had changed, but everything had. I finished the water and set the glass in the dishwasher. Then I walked back upstairs, turned off the light in the workspace, and closed the door behind me. The house settled into evening quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed in the master room, Brandon's room really, and looked at the empty side where he used to sleep. The pillow was still indented from the last time he'd been here. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt finished. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more documents, more interviews, but tonight, for the first time in 4 years, I didn't have to pretend. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The fan turned slowly overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed on the street. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine. Morning light filtered through the blinds in the Summerlin house as I waited in the living room. The doorbell rang at exactly 9. Agent Carter stood on the porch with 3 other agents, all in plain dark jackets and carrying briefcases. I opened the door without hesitation. "Come in," I said. They moved efficiently, no wasted steps. Carter handed me a copy of the search warrant, standard federal form signed by a U.S. magistrate judge the night before. I skimmed it, authority to seize electronic devices, financial records, and any documents related to Whitaker Financial Solutions. I signed the receipt acknowledgement and stepped aside. The team split up. 2 agents went straight to Brandon's home office at the back of the house. Carter stayed with me. "You're here as a cooperating witness," he reminded me quietly. "You know the layout. If we need access explained, you're the one to do it." I nodded. We followed the others. The office door was already open when we arrived. Brandon was there, standing in the center of the room in yesterday's shirt sleeves rolled up, face drawn. He hadn't slept. His eyes flicked to me first, then to Carter. "This is unnecessary," he said, voice tight, but trying for calm. "We can handle this privately. In the family." I looked at him. The man who had once promised me a life together now stood in a room full of federal agents, grasping for control that was already gone. "There is no family left to handle anything," I replied evenly. "Not anymore." He flinched just slightly. The agents ignored the exchange. One knelt by the desk tower and began disconnecting cables. Another opened drawers, photographing contents before removing them. Carter gestured to the main computer. We need access to the financial database. Full privileges. Brandon stepped forward. You can't just... You're not required to assist, Carter cut in, but obstruction will add charges. Brandon's jaw tightened. He looked at me again, searching for something, maybe a crack. Maybe mercy. I gave him neither. I moved to the keyboard. The login screen appeared. No romantic password, no birthday trick. Brandon had always been careful with surface security but careless with patterns. Over the years, he had brought home printed reports, balance sheets, reconciliation summaries, audit trails. He left them on the kitchen table, on the coffee table, sometimes on the nightstand. I memorized the recurring codes he used, sequences based on fiscal quarter dates, client ID prefixes, internal reference numbers. He thought they were random. They weren't. I typed the first layer, a 12-character alphanumeric string derived from the last quarter-end report he'd reviewed aloud on speakerphone one evening. The screen shifted to secondary authentication. I entered the next pattern pulled from a memo he'd left in the printer tray months ago. Access granted. The agents took over from there. External drives connected, forensic imaging software began running. Files streamed across screens, ledgers, wire confirmations, email threads with county officials. Brandon watched in silence as his carefully constructed world was copied bit by bit. He tried one last time. Jenna, he said, almost a whisper. We can still fix this. For Ethan. I turned to him. Ethan is the reason this stops now. He looked away. The agents finished the initial imaging. One nodded to Carter. We've got everything on the primary server. Backups are being pulled from the external drives. Carter turned to Brandon. You're coming with us. Voluntary interview at the field office. You can call your attorney on the way. Brandon didn't resist. Two agents stepped forward. Steel cuffs clicked around his wrists. He didn't fight. He just lowered his head as they led him out of the room. The house fell silent after the front door closed. Vivian was in the kitchen, standing by the sink, staring at nothing. Brooke sat on the living room couch, knees drawn up, face buried in her hands. Ryan had already left quietly without a word, probably to meet his own lawyer. I stood in the doorway of the office for a moment longer. The room looked the same, desk, bookshelves, framed awards on the wall, but it felt hollow now. The agents were packing up equipment, sealing evidence bags. One of them glanced at me. We'll be in touch for follow-up. Stay available. I nodded. They left. The door clicked shut behind the last one. I walked through the house slowly. Past the photos on the hallway wall, Brandon and me at the wedding, Ethan's first birthday, family gatherings where everyone smiled for the camera. I didn't stop to look closely. There was no point. In the kitchen, Vivian finally spoke. Her voice was small. You didn't have to do this. I paused at the counter. Yes, I did. She didn't argue. She just turned back to the sink, hands gripping the edge. I went upstairs. Ethan's room was still empty. He wouldn't be home until after school. I sat on the edge of his bed and looked at the drawings taped to the wall, stick figures of a family son in the corner house with a red door. Simple. Innocent. I felt something loosen inside me, not anger, not satisfaction. Relief. The kind that comes after carrying something heavy for too long and finally setting it down. The afternoon passed quietly. I answered a call from the school confirming Ethan's pickup later. I made a sandwich I didn't eat. I sat on the patio for a while, watching the desert sun move across the sky. When the school bus dropped him off, he ran up the driveway with his backpack bouncing. Mom, he called, waving a paper with a gold star on it. I met him at the door and knelt down. He hugged me hard the way he always did. I held him close, breathing in the smell of crayons and playground dust. Inside the house was still. No Brandon. No Vivian or Brooke. They had left earlier, probably to stay with friends or a hotel. Just Ethan and me. We sat at the kitchen table. He showed me his drawing. I listened to every word. For the first time in years, the silence around us didn't feel like a weight. It felt like space. Space to breathe. Space to begin again. The secure phone vibrated on the kitchen counter late one afternoon. The number was blocked, but I recognized the pattern's short, deliberate rings. I answered without speaking first. Jenna Ryan said quietly, "We need to meet. Parking garage under the federal building downtown. Level 3. 1 hour. No pleasantries, no explanation. Just the location and the urgency." I arrived early. The garage was dimly lit concrete echoing with distant engines. I parked in a shadowed corner and waited. Ryan pulled in 10 minutes later driving a plain sedan instead of his usual SUV. He got out, looked around once, then walked toward me carrying a small black hard drive in a clear plastic sleeve. He stopped a few feet away. "This is the master ledger," he said. "Every transaction. Shell accounts, bribe payments, dates, amounts, recipient names. Everything they told me to delete." I didn't reach for it yet. "Why now?" He exhaled. "They approached me 2 weeks ago. Showed me what they already had. Said cooperation would mean reduced exposure. I didn't believe them at first. Then I saw the asset freeze notice. I realized Brandon was going to let everyone else take the fall." His voice stayed level, but his hands shook slightly as he held out the drive. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. I don't want 20 years in federal prison because of his mistakes." I took the drive. It felt heavier than it should have. "You'll need to sign the cooperation agreement. Full immunity in exchange for testimony." He nodded. "I know. I'll sign whatever they want." We stood there in the quiet of the garage. No more words were needed. Then tires screeched around the ramp. Brooke's car skidded to a stop, blocking the lane. She jumped out, face flushed, eyes wild. "I knew it," she said, voice cracking. I heard the call. "You're selling us out." Ryan turned slowly. "Brooke, go home." She stepped closer. "You're giving her everything, after everything we did for you. You're throwing away the family." Ryan's expression hardened. "There is no family left to throw away. Brandon built this mess. I'm not going down with him." Brooke's hands clenched, tears spilled over. "You're a coward." He didn't answer. He just looked at her for a long moment, then walked back to his car. The engine started. He drove away without looking back. Brooke stood frozen in the middle of the aisle. She looked at me, eyes full of something between rage and despair. "You won," she whispered. I didn't reply. I got in my car and left her standing there. That night the house was dark. Ethan was asleep upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table with the hard drive in front of me. I plugged it into my laptop. Files opened, spreadsheets, scanned checks, email chains with county officials' timestamps matching the ones I'd collected years ago. It was complete. I forwarded everything to Agent Carter with a single-line ledger delivered. "Ready for formal statement." The reply came quickly. "Received. Bring it tomorrow. We'll move fast." I closed the laptop and looked out the window. The neighborhood lights glowed softly. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary night. But not for long. The call came just after midnight. The school's security line. "Mrs. Whitaker. This is the night monitor at Henderson Academy. We have an emergency. Your husband arrived unannounced. He claimed emergency pickup for Ethan. The staff tried to verify, but he insisted. He left with the boy 10 minutes ago." I was already standing. "Which direction?" "West on the 215. We called the police, but I hung up. My heart didn't race. It steadied. I grabbed my keys, the secure phone, and the backpack Ethan used for school, the one with the GPS tracker I'd sewn into the lining months earlier just in case. I called Carter on the way out the door. Brandon violated the temporary custody order, took Ethan from school. Heading west. "Stay on the line," he said. "We're tracking the signal now. Roadblocks are going up on the interstate." I drove fast but controlled. The highway was quiet at this hour. Headlights cut through the dark. I kept the phone on speaker. Signal shows he's on the 215 toward the desert, Carter said. We have units moving to intercept. Do not engage. Let us handle it. I didn't argue. I just drove. 20 minutes later, Carter's voice came back. They've stopped him at the checkpoint near the state line exit. He's pulled over. Child is in the vehicle. No resistance so far. I exhaled. I'm 5 minutes out. Stay back until we secure the scene. I slowed as I approached the flashing lights. Patrol cars blocked the ramp. Brandon's car was pulled to the shoulder. Agents surrounded it. One opened the back door. Ethan climbed out, rubbing his eyes, confused but unharmed. Brandon was cuffed on the ground, face down on the asphalt. He didn't look up as I parked. I got out. An agent nodded. He's secure. I walked to Ethan. He ran the last few steps and buried his face in my shirt. I held him tightly, one hand on his back, the other stroking his hair. It's okay, I whispered. I've got you. He didn't cry. He just clung. Carter approached. We'll take it from here. Child Protective Services is on the way for temporary assessment, but he can stay with you tonight. We'll coordinate. I nodded. Thank you. They loaded Brandon into a transport van. He finally looked at me through the window. His face was blank. No anger, no pleading. Just emptiness. The van pulled away. I carried Ethan to my car. He fell asleep against my shoulder before I even buckled him in. The drive back was slow. The highway empty. Stars sharp overhead. When we got home, I carried him upstairs. I laid him in his bed, pulled the blanket over him, and sat beside him until his breathing evened out. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hallway with the door open, watching his chest rise and fall. The silence was different now. It wasn't empty. It was safe. The secure phone buzzed against my palm while I was folding Ethan's laundry in the hallway. The screen showed Agent Carter's number. I answered immediately. Jenna, he said, tone clipped. We have a signal from the GPS tracker in Ethan's backpack. It's moving west on the 215 heading toward the desert. Brandon violated the custody order. He took the boy from school grounds about 30 minutes ago. I set the folded shirt down carefully. My pulse stayed level. I'm tracking it on my end too. How far out? Approximately 20 miles from your location. We're deploying units to set up roadblocks at the major exits leading to the open desert. Do not pursue alone. Meet us at the command post off the 215 interchange. We'll coordinate from there. I was already moving toward the garage. I'm on my way. The drive took 12 minutes. Traffic was light. I kept the phone on speaker while Carter updated me in real time. The signal was steady, consistent speed, no sudden turns. Brandon wasn't trying to hide. He was running. The command post was a temporary setup in an empty lot near the highway. 2 unmarked SUVs, a tactical van, and 4 agents with laptops and radios. Carter waited by the lead vehicle. He handed me a tablet showing the live GPS dot moving across a digital map. He's still on the 215, he said. We have 2 roadblocks ahead, one at the state line exit, one further out near the old mining road. Local sheriff's deputies are assisting. No aerial assets yet. We don't want to spook him. I stared at the dot. Ethan's backpack, the one I'd insisted on buying with the reinforced lining because I never fully trusted the custody arrangement, was now the only thing connecting us in real time. Carter glanced at me. You don't have to be here for this part. We can handle the intercept. I need to be there, I said. For Ethan. He didn't argue. Get in. We're rolling. We drove in convoy, 2 SUVs and the tactical van west on the highway. The desert opened up around us, flat sand, scattered Joshua trees, distant mountains turning purple in the fading light. The GPS dot slowed, then stopped. Carter's radio crackled. Primary unit reports visual. Vehicle matching description, pulled over at the first roadblock. Adult male driver, 1 child passenger. No weapons observed. Suspect is complying. I exhaled slowly. The convoy pulled up behind the blockade. Lights flashed silently. Agents were already positioned, 2 at the driver's door, 1 at the rear passenger side. Brandon sat behind the wheel, hands visible on the steering wheel. Ethan was in the back seatbelt still buckled, looking out the window with wide eyes. I got out before anyone could stop me. An agent tried to wave me back, but Carter nodded once. Let her through. Controlled approach. I walked forward slowly. Brandon saw me and stiffened. His face was pale, eyes red-rimmed. Ethan spotted me and his expression changed confusion to relief in a single heartbeat. I stopped 10 feet from the car. No raised voice, no threat. Brandon, I said, calm and clear. Let him go. He looked at me, then down at Ethan. The boy was starting to cry, quiet, hiccuping sobs. Vivian already gave a statement, I continued. She admitted providing the cash for you to run. It's over. You have no path left. Brandon's shoulders dropped. He stared at the dashboard for a long moment. Then he reached over slowly and unbuckled Ethan's seatbelt. The boy scrambled out of the car and ran straight to me. I dropped to one knee and caught him. His arms wrapped around my neck. I held him tight, one hand on the back of his head, shielding him from the lights. Behind me, agents moved in. Brandon didn't resist. They opened the door, pulled him out, and secured his wrists. He didn't look at me again. Ethan pressed his face into my shoulder. Mommy, he whispered. I'm here, I said. You're safe. Carter approached. We'll need a brief statement from him at the scene for the violation report. Then you can take him home. Child Services will follow up tomorrow, but he stays with you tonight. I nodded. An EMT checked Ethan quickly. Vitals normal, no injuries. He clung to me the whole time. They loaded Brandon into the back of a patrol car. The door closed with a solid thud. The car pulled away, lights flashing into the darkening desert. I carried Ethan back to my SUV. He fell asleep against me before I even started the engine. The drive home was quiet. Highway lights streaked past. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting on his leg. When we pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the porch light. I carried him inside up the stairs and laid him in his bed. He stirred once, murmured something about school, then settled. I sat beside him, watching his chest rise and fall. The room smelled like crayons and laundry detergent. Downstairs, I poured a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window. The neighborhood was asleep. Streetlights glowed softly. A car passed slowly, headlights sweeping the curb. I thought about the GPS tracker, how I'd sewn it in after the first custody hearing just in case. How I'd tested it once walking the block with Ethan to make sure the signal held. How I'd never told anyone. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. I finished the water and rinsed the glass. Then I went back upstairs, left Ethan's door cracked, and sat in the hallway with my back against the wall. The house was still. No footsteps. No voices, no threats. Just the sound of my son breathing. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel fragile. It felt permanent. Months later, the federal courthouse in downtown Las Vegas looked the same, on the outside, tall glass windows reflecting the desert sun, security lines moving steadily through the lobby. Inside the courtroom, though, everything had changed. Brandon Whitaker stood at the defense table in a plain gray jumpsuit. His shoulders were narrower now, his face thinner. The judge, a stern woman with gray streaked hair, read the sentence without emotion. On the counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, and bribery of public officials, the defendant is sentenced to 18 years in federal custody. No parole eligibility for the first 10 years. Restitution in the amount of $12 million is ordered payable to affected parties and the company's former employees. The gavel fell once. Brandon did not react. He simply stared at the table in front of him. Marshals moved in and led him away. He never looked toward the gallery where I sat quietly in the back row. The company was gone. Whitaker Financial Solutions had been liquidated under court order. Assets seized, accounts, frozen, client funds transferred to a receivership for repayment. The office building downtown was empty now, windows dark, sign removed. Vivian Whitaker no longer lived in the sprawling Summerlin house. The property had been sold at auction to cover restitution. She moved to a small one-bedroom apartment in Henderson, the kind with thin walls and a parking lot that smelled of motor oil. Her savings, whatever remained after taxes and legal fees, barely covered rent and groceries. She stopped going to the country club luncheons. Her phone calls to old friends went unanswered. The woman who once judged my wardrobe now shopped clearance racks at discount stores and waited for the bus in the heat. Brooke filed for divorce from Ryan the week after the sentencing. The papers were simple, uncontested. She kept nothing. No alimony, no shared assets. Ryan's cooperation with the FBI had earned him a reduced sentence, probation instead of prison, but his career in finance was over. No firm would touch him. He took a job managing inventory at a warehouse on the edge of town, working nights to avoid seeing people he used to know. Brooke moved into a rented studio apartment near the Strip, working part-time at a coffee shop. She stopped wearing designer labels. She stopped talking about the family name. I kept the educational trust fund that had been established for Ethan before the marriage. It was clean, untouched by the fraud, legally insulated under Nevada trust law. The principal remained intact, earning steady interest for his future college expenses. I sold the Summerlin house myself. The proceeds went toward restitution and legal costs, but I used a small portion to buy a modest two-bedroom condo in the same neighborhood, close enough to Ethan's school, far enough from the old memories. I continued my freelance editing work from home. The deadlines were steady, the pay reliable. Occasionally, I provided documents or testimony when the U.S. Attorney's Office requested it. No promotions, no headlines, just quiet consistency. Ethan adjusted faster than I expected. He asked about his father once or twice, but the questions faded. He made new friends at school, brought home drawings of spaceships and dinosaurs, laughed at cartoons on Saturday mornings. I hung his artwork on the refrigerator with magnets shaped like stars. Some nights I sat on the balcony after he went to bed. The city lights spread out below, distant, glittering, indifferent. I thought about the years I had spent inside that other house, smiling when I didn't mean it, listening when I wanted to speak. I thought about the nights I stayed awake, building the case file by file, knowing the moment would come, but never certain it would arrive. It had arrived, and it had passed. The silence that used to feel like a cage now felt like freedom. I learned something in those years that I carry with me. Still, people who measure worth by bank balances and last names will always underestimate those who don't. They see dependence and mistake it for weakness. They see patience and mistake it for surrender. They never realize that quiet observation can be more powerful than loud ambition. Arrogance blinds, entitlement deafens, greed destroys, but intelligence, patient, disciplined, unshowy, endures. Self-reliance isn't about proving something to others, it's about protecting what matters most. For me, that was Ethan. For him, it meant a childhood, without shadows, without lies, without the weight of a name that no longer meant anything. I don't regret the years I waited. I don't regret the silence I kept. I only regret that it took so long to see the truth clearly. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're not enough because of where you come from, what you earn, or how quietly you carry yourself, hear this. Your worth isn't measured by their standards. It's measured by your choices, by how you protect what's yours, by how you rise when the time is right. Stay patient, stay sharp, stay true. The people who underestimate you today may never understand what happened tomorrow. And that's okay. Because you will.